By the summer of 1986, Nintendo had proven its mastery in the graceful art of platforming, with home console hits like Donkey Kong, Ice Climber, and Super Mario Bros. And with The Legend of Zelda, it took the possibilities of a single cartridge to the limits, providing an adventure too big to handle in one sitting. All that remained missing from the legendary library was a solid action game, one that required a little more firepower than foot stomping and club whacking. What Nintendo had in mind combined Mario's liquid-smooth leaping and landing, Link's tool-driven ability enhancing, and sci-fi gunplay that inspired action evolutions like Commando and Contra. Metroid was hatched for the Famicom Disk System on August 6, 1986, and then on the Nintendo Entertainment System 1 year later. The scrolling shooter was produced by Gunpei Yokoi, who had previously produced Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and the original Mario Bros. He also contributed heavily to the development of the Game & Watch series, the NES Zapper Gun, and eventually the Game Boy. It was directed by Yoshio Sakamoto, who had previously worked on the design for Donkey Kong Jr., and the music was written by Hirokazu Hip Tanaka, whose previous digital compositions included Urban Champion, Balloon Fight, Wild Gunman, Gyromite, and Duck Hunt. Metroid set itself apart by being a non-linear adventure-based game. Exploration was a crucial part of the experience. To delve deeper into Planet Zeeb's underground chambers, you had to eliminate bosses, discover new weapons, upgrade your armor, and find powerful abilities that permitted access to unreachable, sometimes secret areas, even if that meant going in reverse and moving the screen in an unthinkable direction, left. Although commonplace in games today, backtracking was a new concept in 1986. Search and discovery is still what makes the franchise popular today. The character whose footsteps you were retracing was a bounty hunter named Samus Aran. Commissioned by the Galactic Federation to infiltrate the pirate lair within Zeebs and recover a stolen organism locked inside, Samus was a lone soldier with a protective cybersuit, built-in laser cannon, wicked backflip, and a mysteriously concealed identity. The life force Samus was battling for was stolen from a deserted planet called SR-388. Although the organism was in hibernation, it was rumored that exposure to beta rays would cause it to multiply at an alarming rate. The Chozo, the creatures responsible for farming these parasites, called them Metroids, which meant ultimate warrior in their language. Metroid was one of the first games to successfully impress a feeling of desperation and solitude on the player, a feat not easily accomplished on an 8-bit console. The combination of detailed sprites, original, sometimes obscure map designs, disturbing creatures, and an intimidating, eerie musical score generated an unparalleled ambiance and atmosphere that trapped the viewer in an almost constant state of uneasy claustrophobia. You really felt alone. It's a good thing there were ice beams to keep you company. Wave beams came in handy too, along with energy tanks, screw attacks, various suits, and high jump boots. Following Zelda's lead, Metroid helped pioneer the idea of acquiring tools to strengthen your character and help you progress through the game. Up until that point, most ability-enhancing power-ups like the Power Shot in Gauntlet or the Star in Super Mario Bros. Offered only temporary boosts to your character and weren't required to reach the end. Items in Metroid were permanent fixtures. Missiles were mandatory if you wanted to finish the game, as was a peculiar method of travel new to the NES. Somehow, Samus could collapse that spacesuit into a metal sphere and roll around, eventually gaining the ability to drop bombs in the form as well. The Morph Ball slammed an undeniable stamp of coolness on the whole experience and the franchise that still exists today. Surviving through the space station to its innermost secrets brought you to the mastermind, Mother Brain. Her battle was definitely a challenge, but the real surprise was afterwards. Instead of flashing a victory screen and scrolling the credits, you had a short amount of time to escape the facility to safety. A twist few saw coming. If you managed to make it out, you were given an end screen based on the time it took you to get there. Metroid was one of the first games to contain multiple endings, 5 in total. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th endings all revealed something shocking. Samus popped off her biosuit's secure helmet, and the character underneath wasn't a man, or a robot, or a cyborg, but a woman. At a time when female video game characters were forced into the role of dutiful queen or kidnapped princess, Samus blew this norm to pieces, missile blasting the genre open for other heroines like Chun-Li and Lara Croft to play with the big boys. Contrary to internet clamor, Samus does not expose her birthday suit if you kill Mother Brain in less than 10 minutes. But you can play as Samus without her cyber suit if you're good enough. The multiple endings to Metroid enticed players to race through the game as fast as possible, a video game art form now commonly known as speedrunning. A game requiring such a massive amount of exploration needed a way to continue your progress, so Metroid utilized a password system that was still new to the industry. Writing the code down and punching it back in was a bit of a hassle, but it was much better than starting the game over from the very beginning. The Famicom disk system had a disk to save data on, so Metroid in Japan allowed 3 save slots, just like The Legend of Zelda did in North America. Unfortunately, the use of an internal battery to manage the files wasn't fully realized in time for the international release. But that didn't stop fans from digging up their own custom codes, including one hard-coded into Metroid that granted infinite ammo, health, all power-ups, and a slightly cooler ice beam. Metroid brought explosive action to the NES and a newfound respect for female protagonists to new heights. It stood by itself on the console, but it started a beloved franchise spanning 9 games that have collectively sold over 13 million units. But the franchise wouldn't see its second installment for another 5 years. Zelda told its Chapter 2 in 1987, and Mario got a pseudo-sequel in 1988, but no other 8-bit Metroid was released during the life cycle of the NES or Famicom. This was partly because 3 years after Metroid, gamers got their hands on the bulky but brilliant Game Boy. Eager to develop exclusive titles for the handheld, Nintendo commissioned the R&D 1 team to strip Samus down to black and white. Metroid 2: Return of Samus landed on August 26, 1991, and wasn't released in Japan until 5 months later. Despite it being the second release in the franchise, Metroid 2 is the 6th installment in the story thus far. The game was developed by Intelligent Systems, the first and only Metroid the company made. Yokoi produced, and it was co-directed by Hiroji Kiyotake and Hiroyuki Kimura. Much like James Cameron's Aliens, Return of Samus sends the space hunter back to the planet that started it all, SR-388. After losing contact with the team sent to investigate the Metroid lair, Samus is promised a huge bounty to destroy the parasite's origin once and for all. Deep within a live volcano, Samus finds Chozo ruins, free-roaming Metroids, and strange links to her past. Metroid 2 played much like it did on the console, in that shooting, platform jumping, and exploration defined the gameplay. It even controlled a little easier, with Samus gaining the ability to crouch and fire, as well as jump and shoot straight down. However, the revolutionary advancement model that blew up the original game was a bit more limiting on the Game Boy. Progression was based on the eradication of Metroids. In the lower right corner of the screen was a counter indicating how many of the life-sucking flying jellyfish were left. Defeating all of them in a particular area caused an earthquake that lowered the lava level, opening up a new section of the world full of more Metroids to destroy and more lava to do away with. You were still hunting for energy tanks and add-ons, but you were confined to one segment of the world at a time. But there were still new abilities to be found, the most invaluable involving Samus dunking herself in rubber cement, giving her the Spider Ball ability. This allowed Samus to crawl up any wall and ceiling when morphed, offering a new efficient method of treasure seeking. The Spider Ball and the Space Jump, which allowed Samus to flip continuously in the air, returned in later installments, along with the Spring Ball, which let Samus's morph shape bounce off the ground. The Arm Cannon also got an upgrade, adding Spazer and Plasma Beams to the mix. The black and white color template definitely limited the level of detail the designers could lay out in each area, but it also led to some interesting permanent changes to Samus's gear. Without color, there was no way you could visibly register the swap between the normal suit and the various suit, so the updated gear gained round metal shoulders, and they've stuck ever since. Despite the Metroid 2 cartridge being about 6 times as small as its predecessor, you could now save your game for the first time in the franchise. Scattered throughout the Forgotten Corridors were portals Samus could stand on and preserve her progress. These popped up in every game following, eventually becoming energy recovery units. As you dug deeper into the Metroid Hive, you discovered an ecosystem that's exclusive to the Game Boy release. Metroid 2 is the only game in the series to show every stage of a Metroid's 6 development cycles, outside of the one introduced in the first game: Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, Omega, and Queen. The more developed the organism, the stronger their attacks become, which hunters took notice of as they worked their way up the evolutionary ladder. This led to a frantic confrontation with the Queen Metroid, but interestingly, no escape run back to Samus's ship. Instead, Samus encountered something her experiences hadn't prepared her for. After reaching the surface, she stumbled upon a newly hatched Metroid that mistook the bounty hunter for its mother. Instead of wasting the last Metroid, Samus spared it and took it aboard. She left for the Ceres space station to return with a live sample, and a strange bond was formed between them. The Return of Samus wasn't as well received as its NES counterpart, mainly for being more linear and not leaving such a dramatic impression in the audio and visual departments. The model of Samus used was bigger in proportion to her surroundings to give her more detail using the limited graphics capabilities, making the Game Boy environments feel a little cramped. But it still maintained the high standards set by the first Metroid, introduced methods of exploration the series couldn't live without, and told one of the most pivotal chapters in Samus's evolving plotline. Some consider it to be the weakest game in the franchise, but the least outstanding installment in one of the most groundbreaking action sagas of all time is still a fine game. Come back next week for part 2 in our 5-part Metroid retrospective. As we move onward, so does technology, as the Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance give birth to the 2 most remarkable installments in the franchise. One showed the new generation exactly how a series should be upgraded with new hardware, and the other divulged what was thought to be the conclusion to Samus' story.
Is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
Metroid fans not only had to wait until Nintendo's next system to play the first console sequel to the original game, the 3rd installment wasn't available until 4 years after the Super Nintendo was released. This was 4 years after Super Mario World and 3 years after A Link to the Past. Samus's next mission would have to really impress to justify its lengthy development period. Thankfully, it did. In March of 1994, Super Metroid didn't simply evolve from its NES counterpart or continue the story after the Game Boy game. It practically redefined video game achievement. Managed by Gunpei Yokoi, co-directed by Yoshio Sakamoto and Makoto Kano, and developed by R&D1, the same company that started it all in the NES, Super Metroid raised video game standards with its superior graphics, music, play control, design, and challenge. The story picked up where the Game Boy ended, with Samus dropping off her newly adopted Metroid so scientists would hopefully discover how mankind could benefit from the newborn's untapped properties. But it wasn't long before Ridley, the dragon-like general of Mother Brain and leader of the space pirates, invaded the laboratory, stole the Metroid, and flew off to planet Zeebs. All the familiar elements returned, running, gunning, discovering, and destroying, except everything was better. The first recognizable enhancement was the Stark atmosphere. The silent intro and title screen foreshadowed the aura of obscurity and peril surrounding the game. Each of the 6 detailed environments on the enormous Zeebs had a life of its own. The lava-filled Norfair with heat-blurring backgrounds was steamy, bright, and hot. Underwater Meridia delivered the opposite mood, brisk, blue, and cool. Every dwelling, like the jungle-infested Brinstar, the ghostly wrecked ship, and the fortress of Mother Brain and Turian, left a lasting impression. Defeating menacing enemies was a bit easier this time around, as Samus had a few new moves up her cannon. For the first time in the series, Samus could shoot in all 8 directions, making it painless to blow up those pesky ceiling bats. She could perform continuous wall jumps, opening up numerous shortcuts, and even moonwalk when she had to fire in one direction and gracefully walk in the other. The upper right corner of the screen revealed a small map indicating your current location and adjacent rooms. Pressing start allowed you to view the map in its entirety. Scattered throughout the game were map data stations that filled in the uncharted lands, making exploring more manageable, which made the missions to follow that much more fun. Of course, new items and power-ups were abundant as well. The grappling beam let Samus attach to magnetic surfaces, allowing her to swing herself across vacant gaps. The speed booster helped her run at Mach 9, plowing through destructible walls and letting her defy gravity. And when the shot button was held down, the charge beam gathered energy, delivering a large burst of plasma goodness when released. One particular add-on that's been seen in every Metroid since. But there were so many more useful items and power-ups, like the X-ray scope, super missiles, power bombs, hyper beam, gravity suit, and more, all either returning or influencing new ideas in the sequels to come. Boss battles were a regular spectacle in Super Metroid, as you encountered over 10 of them, each cleverly designed, challenging you to figure out how to annihilate them as quickly as possible. Some bosses were 30 times your size, with irregular movement patterns and hidden strategies. all of them carried the mounting tension to the unforgettable finale. A weakened Samus lay helpless to the final charge from Mother Brain, when out of nowhere, after finishing the game, Super Metroid kept with tradition, rewarding speedy players with a screenshot of a barely clothed Samus. Your completion time was shown, as well as a percentage of the amount of items you found. This small addition tempted players even more, daring them to not only finish the game with every item, but to do it as fast as possible. Super Metroid is arguably the most popular speedrunning game of all time, as it's still being mastered today. Super Metroid is easily considered not only the best Metroid in the series, but the greatest 2D side-scrolling adventure ever. It's frequently been published in numerous best games lists, and has claimed the #1 spot more than once. Everything from the seductive title screen to the dramatic closing moments was undeniably polished. It was a masterpiece of action, and gamers wanted more. But more didn't happen for quite some time. Fans grew confused that the bounty hunter completely bypassed the Nintendo 64. The last Metroid had perished, making fans wonder if Nintendo had put the galactic superhero on the shelf for good. In 2001, the Game Boy Advance was released, and there were talks of another 2D Metroid in development, one that would resemble Super Metroid, and in some ways better it. The fallout from Metroid 2 didn't guarantee it would be a smash hit, but at that point, gamers were so starved for Samus, they snapped in their AA batteries once more. After 8 lengthy years, Samus finally returned in Metroid Fusion. The 32-bit sequel was released in the US in November of 2002. At its core, Metroid Fusion retained the formula, but this handheld title presented a more user-friendly, objective-based adventure that emphasized story. Chronologically, Fusion is the last mission Samus has currently undertaken, and it directly follows the events of Super Metroid. On a scheduled research assignment back on SR-388, an unknown specimen dubbed the X-Parasite attacked Samus. Infected and nearing death, scientists removed parts of her toxic suit to store for research, and exposed Samus to a vaccine filled with DNA stored from the hatchling that had already saved her life once before. Samus was weakened, but the procedure gave her Metroid-like abilities that allowed her to absorb the X-Virus in its raw form. Her new mission was to regather her lost suit powers and neutralize the SA-X, a form of the contamination that had mimicked her power suit. Metroid Fusion was the most story-driven installment. It was narrated frequently through written dialogue, usually between Samus and her computer. Cutscenes, sometimes accompanied with text, also helped each event unfold. These added character to the heroine who, up until now, showed basically no emotion. Perhaps catering towards the casual handheld audience, Fusion was much more user-friendly than any other Metroid. The game was objective-based, meaning you always knew where you had to go thanks to your computer, who briefed you on current objectives via various navigation routes. This meant, like in Metroid 2, you were confined to smaller areas. Your health and missiles could be recharged by absorbing X-particles. Health recharging rooms and energy tanks were also abundant, and special items traditionally reserved for later stages, like the power bombs, were now obtained much earlier. In addition, the Space Babe could now grab onto ledges and pull herself up, as well as climb ladders and ceilings, dealing firepower above and below. These elements were uncharacteristic for a Metroid title, but they kept the player's focus on the fun of platforming action instead of the worry of ammo depletion or mission progression. But there were still surprises in store. Areas would get blocked off unexpectedly, and new enemies would appear in places you had already visited. Not like the darker and moodier visuals from previous titles, the art style in Fusion was vibrant and colorful, sometimes reminiscent of a comic book. Animations flowed smoothly, explosions contained bits and fragments, backgrounds animated, and more. The music didn't quite meet the high standards of its predecessor, but the sound effects stood on their own. Plasma and missile blasts burst from Aaron's cannon and crackled upon annihilation of their targets, while emergency distress announcements could be heard echoing through the space station.
Emergency in Sector 3.
The traditional power-ups were all there, as well as a few new ones including the ice and diffusion missiles. Abilities were gained by either absorbing X-parasites from host bosses or downloading data directly into your suit. The cat and mouse game played by SAS led Samus on a traditional Metroid adventure. Boss battles were tricky, yet plentiful, but always rewarded you with the appropriate power-up to continue on with your mission, following its predecessor's basic, yet addicting structure. Sooner than fans had suspected, though, Samus confronts the SAX for one final battle, and in customary fashion, it prompted a third race to the finish after Samus programmed the station to crash into SR-388.
Destination, planet SR-388.
But this time, Samus met a boss during the countdown, an Omega Metroid. In an attempt to recreate the glory of Super Metroid's finale, the SAX saved Samus from a final blow. Samus absorbed the X, regained her power suit abilities, and the rest is history. After an 8-year hiatus, there were tremendous expectations for Metroid Fusion, especially after Super Metroid power-bombed the industry. Although the objective-based style somewhat hindered the favored Metroid formula, the graphics, action, and ease of play went far to make up for it. Come back next week for the next upgrade to our 5-part Metroid retrospective. Life-sucking Metroids have never stopped Samus Aran, and neither did 3 Dimensions. In Part 3, the series gets a subtitle that sticks, and blasts into a genre so exciting, Nintendo gave it a brand new name. Shigeru Miyamoto was once quoted as saying, "Through the entire Nintendo 64 period, we were thinking of ways to produce a new Metroid title. We couldn't come up with any concrete ideas at that time." Then, Nintendo approached the president of the Texas-based Retro Studios, Jeff Spangenberg, who is the former founder of Iguana Entertainment, the studio behind Turok Dinosaur Hunter. Impressed by the company and its previous works, Nintendo, along with select Nintendo EAD and R&D1 members, collaborated with Retro and made plans to develop 5 titles for the GameCube. Over time, 4 of them got canceled, as did Spangenberg, who left the company after a series of embarrassing photos were released on the internet. The 5th game was Metroid Prime. Metroid went 3D on November 18, 2002. Chronologically, Prime takes place after Samus's first mission on the NES. Aran responds to a distress signal from a space station orbiting Talon 4 and quickly discovers that it's a space pirate research facility overrun by escaped specimens. The space pirates have begun a series of biological experiments infusing creatures with a radioactive substance called phazon. The station goes critical, and an explosion causes Samus's suit to malfunction, disabling important gear like the Various Suit and Morph Ball. While escaping, she crosses paths with Meta Ridley and follows him to the planet below, where she learns of the meteor impact that brought phazon, the horrifying extent of the pirates' experiments, and the fate of the Chozo, who slowly perished after the impact. Foretelling the return of Samus, the Chozo also left numerous weapons and 12 artifact keys to unseal the source of the phazon corruption. The player's first mission in 8 years was to stop any phazon research being done and eradicate the source of it. Metroid's flip into 3 dimensions was seamless. Prime retained the essential gameplay functions that made the franchise what it was: platform jumping, shooting, and exploring. And it looked better than ever as creatures nestled into dirt, bosses threw their weight around, and environments dripped, wiggled, and boiled. The series prided itself on atmosphere, and the absolute desolation you felt several miles beneath the surface of Talon 4 has yet to be matched. Early builds had Samus hunting from a third-person perspective, but Miyamoto assured the developers a first-person view would better fit the power suit. This was handled rather cleverly by a smooth camera animation as she went from ball to human form. Gamers would have to adjust to the shift, and the industry would have to accept Nintendo's new custom genre. The company officially classified the game as a first-person adventure, not a shooter. Unique to any first-person game, Prime's point of view was from inside Samus's helmet. The HUD wrapped around her face, displaying health and ammo, maps, and imminent threats, but the real magic was how the visor became a real part of the world she was exploring. Steam obscured her view, bug guts splattered across her visor, and electrical enemies interfered with the display, causing it to go static. And if the lighting was just right, you could even catch a glimpse of the beautiful heroine's face. Also new was the ability to lock onto enemies by holding the L button. This fixed her viewpoint on a target, freeing her to strafe, jump, and fire at the same time. Although stationary, manual aiming was also performed by holding the right shoulder button. The simplified control scheme was easier to learn than the dual analog setup customary to most first-person shooters, and it also made traveling surprisingly manageable. There was no corner clinging or wall jumping, but there were still plenty of ways to explore. The scan visor, first hinted at with the X-ray scope in Super Metroid, played a crucial role in Prime. Scanning items, enemies, switches, and more revealed basic or hidden information, opened doors, lowered elevators, etc. The story was told through the data you gathered from your scans, and a logbook collected every record you found. Special visors like the thermal and X-ray models found later in the game let you track enemies and expose secrets that would otherwise be invisible. But on such a gargantuan planet, there were a lot of places to get lost. Thankfully, a never-before-seen hint system offered clues to gamers as to where to go next, and an incredibly detailed 3D map helped them plot their course. Also, items tucked away in each area would make a buzzing noise when you got close to them, letting you know they were close by, but not giving away their exact location. Morphing into Samus's ball form shifted the view into third person, allowing for easier navigation through form-fitting tunnels. The spider ball from Metroid 2 also made a comeback. While it was now limited to magnetic rails, the wall-crawling power-up was just as cool as ever. New to the series was the Boost Ball, which gave a burst of speed to the Space Hunter's morph status, letting her build momentum on half-pipes to reach high places and operate mechanical devices by rotating gears in the ground. Altogether, the various morph ball abilities and the mazes inspired by them provided some of the most distinctive and memorable moments in the game. Short elevator rides and doors that didn't always open right away were used to mask the game's modest load times. This continuous progression made the areas feel more connected, and the entire planet huge and never-ending. After discovering the space pirates' evil plans, retrieving the 12 artifact keys, and killing Meta Ridley, Samus unsealed the impact crater filled with mutated Metroids. There, she confronted the source of the Phazon, Metroid Prime, in an epic two-part boss battle that forced the galactic heroine to utilize every power-up she had gained. After dying, Metroid Prime absorbed the Phazon in Samus' suit, and if you collected all the items, you witnessed it somehow survive. The multiple endings were not based on completion time, but on the percentage of items collected. 100% revealed the best ending, an extended cutscene featuring a helmetless Samus. No 3D bikini, though. Since it was released simultaneously with Metroid Fusion, players could link the two games together via the Game Boy Advance link cable to unlock special bonuses, including a version of the original Metroid and the ability to play through the GameCube game with the suit from Fusion. Fans were initially unsure about Prime. Morphing into 3D was a risky transformation for the franchise, and they weren't sure first person was the best way to play. After its release, however, Metroid Prime received high praise from gamers and critics alike, selling over 1 million units in America alone and winning numerous Game of the Year awards. While criticism of Prime usually involved the lower quality MIDI compositions, a surplus of backtracking, and no option for dual analog control, it still stands to this day as one of the best games of its generation, and one of the greatest 3D games ever made. Players soon realized that Prime was not just a subtitle tacked onto Metroid, but the beginning of a trilogy that would cross 2 platforms and spawn 2 handheld spin-offs. Retro Studios immediately began work on the sequel, hoping to live up to almost unreachable expectations. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, developed by Retro Studios and directed by Mark Pacini, was released on November 15, 2004 in North America, 2 years after Metroid Prime. The story follows its precursor chronologically and takes place before Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. With a new light and dark world dynamic, the Metroid universe became sinister, with mind-crushing puzzles, uglier bosses, and vaster lands. And in a first for the franchise, gamers could charge blast each other in split-screen multiplayer. While combating space pirates collecting Phazon on planet Ether, Galactic Federation Marines lost contact, and Samus was sent to investigate. And in a first for the franchise, gamers could charge blast each other in split-screen multiplayer. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, developed by Retro Studios and directed by Mark Pacini, was released on November 15, 2004 in North America, 2 years after Metroid Prime. The story follows its precursor chronologically and takes place before Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. With a new light and dark world dynamic, if that wasn't demanding enough, Samus also had to locate 9 Sky Temple keys to defeat the Ing once and for all, a mission made more dooming when Samus found a dark version of herself patrolling the planet. In true Metroid fashion, Samus loses her abilities, forcing her to re-upgrade a 6th time to save the planet. Echoes was distinguished for its mirrored dimensions, a feature that was first made popular in Zelda: A Link to the Past. This was one of the many reasons why Kensuke Tanabe, who wrote the SNES classic, was invaluable in the development of Prime 2. With slight variations, each dimension mirrored each other, essentially doubling the size of the game, though some would say in a rather cheap way. Both worlds worked against each other as well, as Ing inhabitants of Dark couldn't survive in the light of Luminov, and vice versa. To avoid losing health in the toxic purple atmosphere, Samus activated light beacons put there by Luminov. Actions done in one realm affected the other. Managing 2 dimensions at once made the puzzles more complex than ever before. Graphics, following an already stellar presentation in Prime 1, were arguably the finest in the series. Maps, puzzles, enemies, and boss battles were deviously devised and had you exploiting your batch of abilities even more so than in the first Prime, especially the Morph Ball and its various functions. Combined with the gorgeous locales from the soaked wetlands of the Torvus Bog with destructible vegetation to the futuristic cybernetic sanctuary fortress, Planet Ether felt more genuine than any other planet Samus previously stepped boot on. New to her arsenal, the female gunner empowered the light and dark beams, both more effective in their opposite realm. These were the first beams to lose ammunition, as Samus could only collect ammo for one by destroying enemies or containers with the other. This put pressure on the bounty hunter to conserve bullets, creating a new strategic element to the gameplay. Other upgrades new to the series were abundant. The Echo Visor allowed Samus to see sound waves and open sonic gates, while the Dark Visor revealed interdimensional items, platforms, and more. Aaron also made use of the Seeker Launcher, Screw Attack, Annihilator Beam, Light Suit, and more. After transferring the remaining dark energy to the Light World, retrieving the 9 Sky Temple keys, and opening the portal to the Sky Temple itself, Eren finally came face to face with the Emperor Ing in a fierce three-part war. Defeating it put the dark side of the planet in critical condition, leaving you with 8 minutes to escape. An easy feat, if only Dark Samus minded her own business. After fending off the evil reflection once more, Samus made it out alive. The best ending was once again based on the percentage of items. 100% showcased Samus in her Zero suit, a blue outfit that debuted in the GBA remake of the NES original. Dark Samus also made a repeat performance in the ultimate finale. Echo's most notable first for the franchise was multiplayer. 4 hunters could assume a different colored Samus and square off on a single screen in deathmatch or bounty mode, the latter challenging opponents to collect coins dropped by injured players. All the control from the single player was intact, and Morph Ball boosting disabled any auto-lock targeting. Adding space pirates collecting Phazon on the planet Ether, Galactic Federation Marines lost contact, and Samus was sent into investment. While combating the dark side of Echo's feedback usually involved the further lack of dual analog control and an even deeper level of backtracking thanks to the dual dimensions and the puzzles they supplied. Multiplayer didn't exactly hurt the game, but most agreed it was a throwaway that didn't warrant repeated play. Some also thought the quest for the 9 Sky Temple keys lasted too long. But fans wanting more of what the original Prime offered got exactly that, and little else. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes scored high among critics and fans, though not to the degree the original did, and it showed at retail, where it was a relative bomb compared to Nintendo's other mascot-based games. Come back for more Prime Time next week in Part 4 of our 5-part Metroid retrospective. Samus spins off to the Nintendo DS, gaining an arcade Morph Ball flipper upgrade and touchscreen controls that revolutionized the iffy prospect of smooth shooting on a handheld. From there, Samus warps to the Wii, and a mysterious corruption infiltrates the new generation. In January 2004, Nintendo announced it was developing the Nintendo DS, a portable device featuring 2 displays. Specific details, including its distinctive touchscreen, were kept under wraps, and little did gamers know that 2 Metroid titles were setting their coordinates for the handheld. At E3 2004, Nintendo unveiled a demo showcasing Samus in 3D for the first time on a handheld. Only this time, instead of locking onto bug-like aliens in a single-player adventure, 4 players took control of Samus in deathmatch battles, frantically tapping the screen to blast each other with plasma cannons. This strenuous and short-lived control scheme was swapped with a much more appealing shoulder button option when a demo titled Metroid Prime Hunter's First Hunt was released as a pack-in for the launch of the DS in November. Strangely, the game hinted at space pirates and featured Metroids, but neither one of them would be seen in the final version. The demo was a teasing taste, and Metroid maniacs were stuck playing it for over a year because of delays while Nintendo overhauled the game to support online play. Finally, on March 20th, 2006, Metroid Prime Hunters was unleashed. The game was developed by NST, the same company that created 1080 snowboarding on the N64. Like the Prime games on GameCube, Hunters played from a first-person perspective, but unlike its predecessors, the DS version lacked the patented lock-on targeting and was a bit more linear. Chronologically, Hunters took place after Prime, but before Prime 2. Samus was commissioned to investigate the Olympic solar system after the Galactic Federation received a telepathic message stating the key to ultimate power resided there. The Federation feared that other entities may have intercepted the message as well, and Samus soon found herself competing with 6 other bounty hunters. Upon investigating, Samus learned the Olympics sealed a monstrous creature called Guria into a dimensional rift called the Infinity Void. Samus's mission was clear: find the 8 octoliths to unseal the Infinity Void and neutralize Guria before the 6 bounty hunters got too close. Hunters shared the same first-person perspective as other Prime games, but you were given more freedom of movement. Players used the control pad to walk and aimed by sliding the stylus across the bottom screen. The lower screen also provided buttons to change weapons, flip on the scan visor, or roll into morph ball form, all of which were accessed by simply touching the appropriate icon. Jumping was performed by double-tapping the touchscreen, and the left shoulder button controlled Samus's beams, missiles, and bombs. Once players got a grip on the DS, the new setup felt almost as smooth as using a mouse and a keyboard, which in turn made combat that much more challenging since precision became mandatory without lock-on capabilities. With the solitude each Metroid title delivered, it was easy to assume Samus was the only bounty hunter in the galaxy, but frequently throughout Hunters, Aaron encountered the 6 bounty brethren that were racing through the same mission she was. Eventually, Samus found 6 weapons that directly correspond to each rival, which ranged from the electrical flicker of the shock coil to the dead-eye sniper of the Imperialist. Each weapon shared universal ammo and sometimes came in handy during sticky situations. Progression in Hunters demanded less exploring and puzzle solving, leaving a more combat-based adventure. For the first time, Samus piloted her ship to 4 different locations in the system, from a snowy planet to a cybernetic space station, returning to each area at least once before the final battle. Although weapon finding was still necessary, there were no mobility upgrades like the space jump or spider ball, and Samus started the game with many of her tools intact, including the morph ball and bombs, missiles, the boost ball, and the charge beam. Hunters was the only Metroid to use full-motion videos. The opening cinematic introduced Samus's foes, short videos introduced each planet, and boss battles began and ended with brief clips. The videos, at times stretched across both screens, boosted the game's presentation and made the game feel remarkably dramatic for a handheld outing. After retrieving the 8 octoliths and unsealing the Infinity Void, Samus set course for the now-revealed Oubliette. Seeking ultimate power, the other 6 bounty hunters unwittingly blasted the seal holding Guria, who then broke free and stole their powers for the final showdown with Samus. The best ending wasn't awarded to players with the fastest time or the most items. Instead, during the final bout, players had to fulfill the Olympic prophecy by shooting symbols around the room in the proper order with the proper weapons. Only then would Guria's true form be revealed, providing players with one more battle, the powerful Omega Cannon, and the pin-up payoff with Samus in her Zero Suit. Scanning and collecting all the information and items put a nice little octolith emblem on your Hunter's license, a scorecard for the game's biggest handheld first, multiplayer. The Wi-Fi battles in Hunters were robust, featuring 4-player matches complete with numerous stat tracking methods from shots fired to most used weapon, and all of them were logged online. The 7 game modes include variations of Capture the Flag and King of the Hill, as well as Prime Hunter, in which the player with the first kill was forced to take on the rest of the combatants. Multiplayer also featured over 20 arenas, 7 playable characters, and voice chat among friends. The focus on multiplayer in early demos left some people worried that the series might head into a different direction, and the single-player game certainly disappointed ardent fans. Complaints consisted of a much too linear adventure that emphasized fighting bad guys over finding secrets, bland enemy AI, and reoccurring boss battles. However, Metroid Prime Hunters was still well received by critics and gamers, mostly for its hearty multiplayer, slick presentation, and smooth controls. Hunters would keep the dual screens of Metroid fans charging for a while, but it wasn't Samus's only release on the handheld. Rolling into stores a few months earlier was a brand new take on the franchise, a spin-off, so to speak. Gone was exploration, save functions, and lock-on targeting. In were flipper paddles, high scores, and extra balls. Metroid Prime Pinball bounced into stores on October 24, 2005, and came bundled with a Rumble Pack that inserted into the GBA slot. It was developed by Fuse Games, mostly known for Mario Pinball Land, which was released for the Game Boy Advance the year before. Although not the action-adventure Metroid fans were accustomed to, Prime Pinball brought more to the table than your ordinary pinball machine, featuring boss battles, plasma shooting, weapon upgrades, and more. There was no specific storyline in pinball, although the events in the game were based on Prime for the GameCube. Samus, serving as the ball in her morph form, had to collect 12 Chozo artifacts, gain access to the Artifact Temple, and defeat both forms of Metroid Prime. The controls were simple. The left and right shoulder buttons operated the flippers, while X, Y, and B used weapons. Sliding your finger across the bottom screen gave the entire table a shake for that extra touch of influence. Collecting the Chozo artifacts was done in a variety of ways, which usually involved completing mini-challenges, which were initiated when the ball hit a switch or passed through a special alley. These mini-games ranged from wall jumping to shooting down beetles to killing Metroids and more. 2 artifacts had to be earned by defeating bosses, Thardus from Phendrana Drifts and the Omega Pirate from the Phazon Mines. Samus even earned power bombs and missile upgrades to help defeat them, which she kept for later boards. Missiles could be fired when Samus activated combat mode, which allowed her to temporarily stand and shoot, impervious to enemy attacks. 6 detailed tables represented locales in Metroid Prime and were accompanied with excellent music taken from themes from previous installments. The rainy Talon overworld featured the same theme from Prime, and the Pirate Frigate spun out a guitar-infused remix of the classic NES tune. After collecting all 12 artifacts, the Artifact Temple opened. Here, the 12 artifacts were transformed into pinballs that had to be placed into slots throughout the temple. Players had to frantically manage 6 balls at a time as Meta Ridley flew over the board dropping bombs. Success granted access to the final confrontation in the Impact Crater. In order to defeat Metroid Prime, Samus temporarily gained the Force Ball ability, allowing her to damage the beast when at high speed. Only one ending was available, and Samus wasn't seen in anything sultry, not even the Zero Suit. The multiplayer component in pinball required only 1 copy of the game and allowed up to 8 players to compete in a race to reach a target score. The battle took place on an entirely new table, Magmoor Caverns. Its tacked-on inclusion was one of the criticisms drawn against the first Metroid DS release, along with its relatively short lifespan. But it was given credit for its crisp graphics and sound, and an unusually engaging take on pinball. Nintendo first revealed its latest home console, then known as the Revolution, at E3 2005. While there was talk of a Smash Bros. Title and first details on the Virtual Console service, Metroid Prime 3 was the only game accompanied by video. Showing Samus's new ship flying and shooting without its pilot in the cockpit, the brief clip offered a first glimpse of the command visor, though no one would realize it for quite some time. A year, the unveiling of the revolutionary motion sensing controller, and a controversial name later, players finally got their hands on Metroid Prime 3 at E3 2006. The demo allowed for free aiming with the remote, with movement handled by the analog stick on the nunchuck. Interactive locks had players twisting their arms in tandem with action on screen, and a new use of the grapple beam let Samus rip shields from doors and enemies. A mysterious character lent assistance midway, and those lucky enough to reach the mission's end faced off against Meta Ridley in a close-quarters free-fall battle inspired by Lord of the Rings. While the control system had to be perfected, the demo impressed, and gamers began eagerly awaiting the final game, scheduled to launch alongside the Wii. Once again, Metroid fans were told to wait, first until early 2007 and then until late summer, as Retro Studios worked to refine the game. Finally, the closing chapter in the Phazon storyline would be told when Metroid Prime 3 Corruption shipped on August 28, 2007. The catastrophes on Talon 4 and Aether were significant, but now Samus had to contend with a whole group of planets that had been affected by Phazon. On top of that, Samus herself had been corrupted by the glowing blue substance, giving her the ability to temporarily enter hyper mode at the price of her health. Retro had listened closely to feedback on the previous 2 games and added a number of additions and refinements to Prime 3. There was a greater emphasis on story as Samus interacted with the Galactic Federation and other bounty hunters. Players would no longer need to constantly switch beams since weapons stacked like in Super Metroid. The X-ray visor returned to be used in conjunction with the certain wall-piercing beam. Samus could now use the command visor to direct her ship to land airstrikes, lift objects, or create a makeshift platform. For most of 2007, Nintendo remained relatively quiet about corruption, until early August when it released a channel for the game and placed the classic Metroid titles on the Virtual Console for download. Join us next week as we look back at the saga of Samus, from start to finish, and end our 5-part Metroid retrospective. We'll begin with a look at the 2004 Game Boy Advance retelling of the original NES action innovator, Zero Mission. Its fresh take on the franchise set in motion a story that spans video games, comics, melees, brawls, and possibly the silver screen. Games spanning 8 missions undertaken by one space heroine, a galaxy protected by a girl who should have died when she was 3, an ancient civilization that trained her to eradicate the existence of creatures it once created for protection, and an evil organization hell-bent on encompassing the creature's power. This is the universe of Metroid. Metroid Zero Mission was released for the Game Boy Advance on February 9, 2004. It was developed by Nintendo R&D 1, the originators of Metroid, and directed by Yoshio Sakamoto, who had a hand in every Metroid game except Return of Samus, Hunters, and Pinball. Retelling the events of the original NES title, Zero Mission was more robust, featuring a larger map, peeks into the Hunter's past, and new scenarios beyond the showdown with Mother Brain. Many of the locales looked similar to their 8-bit counterparts, and items were roughly in the same locations. But the differences between the two outweighed the similarities. A number of items from later games were carried over to the remake, such as the Plasma Beam, Space Jump, Super Missiles, and Power Bombs. Samus could also combine the ice and wave beams just like in Super Metroid, and the map was littered with even more energy tanks and missile expansions, many of them hidden in areas that can only be reached using advanced skills like chaining shine sparks. The biggest addition to Zero Mission was what happened after you defeated Mother Brain and escaped Turian. Samus, thinking she got away safely, removed her power suit just before a space pirate ambush. Her ship was immobilized, but she survived. Bearing only her Zero suit and an emergency pistol, she infiltrated a nearby space pirate mothership. This marked the second time players could play as Samus without her power suit. Nearly defenseless, Zero Suit Samus couldn't run and gun her way to safety. She had to use stealth. By avoiding enemy sights, stunning space pirates, and sneaking into the Chozo ruins, Samus gained a new power suit with expanded functions. Blasting her way back to the mothership at full power, Aaron faced off against the robotic Mecha Ridley and finally escaped in an enemy gunship. Completing the game unlocked a variety of features including hard mode, map-by-map item checklists, and the complete NES version of Metroid. Different artwork was displayed depending on the percentage of items collected, difficulty setting, and time it took to finish the mission. Also, players with 2 GBAs and a copy of Metroid Fusion could connect the two games to unlock the Fusion Gallery, which consisted of additional artwork from the Japanese version of the earlier game. Metroid Zero Mission received high marks by critics and gamers alike, who praised it for superb sound, visuals, and playability. And unlike the dictated events in Fusion, players had the freedom to ignore the hints and explore where they pleased. One common criticism was that the game was too short, which was perhaps an indication that gamers' tastes had shifted from earning faster times to embarking on larger quests. While Zero Mission retold the first chapter of the franchise, it certainly was not the beginning of Samus Aran. What little information that's known of the Space Hunter's upbringing can be gathered from various sources, including Metroid Prime's instruction booklet and the Metroid manga, a comic now available online. When she was a child, Samus and her family lived at planetary colony K2L. Her father specialized in the mining of affluorite, an energy source pivotal to the Galactic Federation. In the year 2000 of the cosmic calendar, the Federation was created by representatives from many races in the galaxy in an effort to create a safer and more secure space for all. Important negotiations amongst the planets were done through a single Federation starship, which was fueled by energy-rich affluorite. Space pirates, led by Ridley, raided ships and planets in their attempt to maintain power and become the most dominant species in the galaxy. While following the Chozo across the stars, Ridley discovered the location of the mines on K2L and ordered his brigade to steal the valuable fuel. Samus was 3 when the invasion took place. The attack resulted in the deaths of all of the colonists, including Samus's mother and father. Miraculously, the little girl lived and was found by the Chozo, a wise and ancient bird-like race. The Chozo raised Samus on Zebes, infusing her with their DNA so she could survive the harsh environment. As she grew, the elders developed her power suit and trained her as a warrior, eventually sending the hunter out to protect the galaxy. Samus was commissioned by the Galactic Federation to return to Zebes, now overrun by space pirates. The pirates had begun to reproduce the dangerous life-sucking creatures called Metroids. The remains of Chozo statues, scattered throughout the planet's tunnels, held weapons and enhancements for Aaron's power suit. Samus defeated Ridley, Kraid, and a biological computer known as Mother Brain, successfully eliminating all Metroids in the process. At the end of Zero Mission, Samus revisits the Chozo ruins, where she recalls her past and completes a challenge to earn a new suit from the spirits of the ancient race. It's unknown whether Mother Brain or Ridley is the true leader of the space pirates. References in the instruction manuals for Metroid and Fusion, the Nintendo Power comic, and the Super Metroid introduction indicate Mother Brain is the general of the space pirates. However, according to Zero Mission, Super Metroid's manual, and the official manga, Ridley is the general. The manga also reveals that Mother Brain was once a counselor to the Chozo, which leaves fans to question whether she tactically betrayed her former masters or was turned against them by invading space pirates. Aaron received a distress signal to travel to Talon 4 and stop space pirates from utilizing phazon, a substance that corrupted the planet after a meteor struck it. Samus discovered that the Chozo once inhabited Talon 4, but have since passed away, leaving only their ghosts to guard their sacred relics. Foretelling the arrival of Samus, the Chozo left numerous weapons for her to defeat the source of the phazon, Metroid Prime, which they sealed with 12 artifacts. Samus fulfills the Chozo prophecy by defeating Metroid Prime, but not before it manages to extract the phazon from her suit and morph into Dark Samus. After the Galactic Federation received a strange telepathic message referring to an ultimate power located in the Limbic Cluster, Samus was ordered to investigate. The 6 bounty hunters that followed her had separate reasons for acquiring this seductive power, and 2 of them had vendettas against Aaron. In particular, Weevil was once a space pirate general who was wounded and turned into a cyborg after an epic battle with Samus. Samus confronted and defeated Guria, the beast that originated the telepathic message, as an attempt to free itself. The ultimate power turned out to be the Omega Cannon, the same weapon Samus used to destroy Guria. Samus left the Limbic Cluster empty-handed, but alive. After the Galactic Federation lost contact with a squad of Marines on planet Ether, they commissioned Samus to investigate. The bounty hunter learned that the Marines were killed by an evil species known as the Ing, which inhabited the planet following a meteor strike that split it into 2 dimensions of light and dark. The Ing were a shadowy species capable of inhabiting the bodies of the living or the dead, or even taking control of machinery. Possessing things allowed the Ing to survive and raid the light world. As far as we know, the Ing have no relationship with the space pirates or Ridley. The Luminoth, a nomadic race living among the stars for centuries, abandoned space to live upon the beautiful ether. Similar to Chozos, Luminoth have a spiritual connection with their planet and are technologically advanced. Umos, the last surviving sentinel on Ether, asked Samus to retrieve the planet's energy from Dark Ether and gave her the light suit to complete the quest. While exploring Ether, Samus encountered and defeated Dark Samus multiple times, but the gloomy doppelganger was able to regenerate itself even after Dark Ether had been destroyed. Galactic Federation then requested Aaron to investigate a series of malfunctioning computers known as the Aurora units. In Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, space pirates infected the Federation's Aurora units with a virus, and Samus became corrupted by Phazon. It was her duty to somehow repair the units and discover the ramifications of her corruption. But there was still one thing lingering in the back of Samus's mind. And once the saga of Prime reached its finale, the bounty hunter traveled to the Metroid homeworld, planet SR-388, to exterminate the species for good. There, she learned that the Metroids molted in cycles, growing into larger creatures. After eradicating all the Metroids, Aaron encountered one final egg. The baby Metroid popped out, mistaking Samus for its mother. Sparing its life, she then handed the larva to Galactic Federation scientists for research. Before Metroids existed on SR-388, the Chozo lived there, as did X-parasites. To fend off these infectious vermin, the Chozo artificially created Metroids and dubbed them Ultimate Warriors. In hindsight, the Chozo trained a bounty hunter to exterminate a species they once unleashed. Soon after she left the Metroid hatchling with the researchers at Sarah's space colony, Samus received a distress signal. The laboratory she had just left had been attacked. A reborn Ridley captured the last remaining Metroid and escaped to Steevn to continue a plan to reproduce Metroids and use them in space pirate attacks. Samus had to defeat Kraid, Ridley, Phantoon, and Dragon to enter a newly constructed command center littered with the remains of the Metroid victims. However, the hatchling remembered its foster mother and assisted Samus in one last battle versus Mother Brain. In the events leading to Metroid Fusion, Samus returned to planet SR-388 to escort researchers studying the fauna of the now Metroid-free planet. Aaron was suddenly attacked and infected by the X-parasite, but was miraculously cured by a Metroid vaccine created from the same hatchling that saved her life in the previous mission. The X-parasite spread throughout the biologic space laboratories, mimicking the life forms it infected, including surgically removed sections of Aaron's power suit. Samus, with the help of her computer Adam, altered the trajectory of the station so that it would crash into SR-388, killing the X-parasites both on the station and the planet below. Metroid Fusion introduced players to Adam Malkovich, who was Aaron's commanding officer on a previous mission. Reminded of Adam by the computer instructing her, she frequently recounts his personality and leadership. Little is known about this operation, but Samus has a profound respect for Adam as he sacrificed himself to save her life. In the aftermath of Fusion, Samus learned that the Federation routinely uploaded the minds of great leaders to computer systems, and her ship's computer actually contained Malkovich's memories. As the laboratory spaceship struck the surface of SR-388, the story of Samus stopped. Aside from the DNA left in her blood, there were no traces of Metroids left in the galaxy. As popular as the series has been, it should come as no surprise that Samus would make appearances in other franchises as well. Her unmistakable image has invaded games, comics, cartoons, and other media. Most notably, Samus was a playable character in Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64, Melee on the GameCube, and Brawl on the Wii, sporting both her power and Slim Zero suit. She napped in Super Mario RPG, played an upright bass in Tetris, transformed into a rock defense in Kirby Superstar, returned as a microgame in 3 WarioWare titles, influenced a Metroid-themed puzzle in Tetris DS, and more. Samus was also a semi-regular character in the comic Captain N the Game Master, while Mother Brain acted as the main villain in the spin-off cartoon of the same name. Interestingly, neither character ever appeared in the opposite medium. A short biography of the legendary heroine can be found in 2 short e-comics published by Kodansha. In 2003, 2 producers optioned the rights to produce a Metroid movie, but they expired. John Woo stepped in a couple of years later to reacquire them. Lion Rock Productions was scheduled to produce, and the plan was to release the first film before 2006. That never happened, and it's currently unknown if the project has been canceled. The solar system of Samus Aran is as expansive as it is popular, with a plethora of battle scars and buried secrets. The alien galaxy meticulously crafted by Nintendo Imagineers has hosted 10 games, selling over 13 million units worldwide, and the numbers are steadily growing. Rest assured, whenever a mission is hatched that's too deadly for Marines to undertake, too dangerous for the Galactic Federation to ignore, and too tempting for space pirates to avoid, a fearless hunter awaits, primed to defend the universe.
2, 1. Let's go. No way.